The desert stretched endlessly under a burning Texas sun. Dust devils swirled across the prairie carrying whispers of old wars and broken promises. On the horizon rode a lone figure, Jonah McAllister, a rancher hardened by years of toil, loss, and the silence of the frontier. His hat shadowed his weathered face, but his eyes, sharp as a hawk's, missed nothing. His horse slowed at the edge of a canyon, ears flicking nervously. That's when Jonah saw her. Half hidden behind a boulder, a young Apache girl, no more than 17, with hair black as midnight and eyes full of fire. She was trembling, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Her dress was torn, her feet cut and bleeding. Jonah dismounted slowly, his boots crunching on the dry earth. "Easy now," he said, voice low and steady like a man speaking to a wild mustang. "I ain't here to hurt you," but the girl flinched, clutching a small stone knife to her chest. Her breath came quick, like a hunted deer. Jonah raised both hands, showing he carried no weapon. "Name's Jonah. I've seen my share of hurt, don't aim to cause more." For a long moment, only the wind answered. Then, in a whisper hoarse from thirst, she spoke her first words. "My name is Ahyoka." The name lingered in the air like a forbidden song. Jonah knew the dangers. A white rancher caught with an Apache girl. The law would hang him, the townsfolk would burn his ranch, and the soldiers would drag her back to the reservation or worse. Still, something in her eyes struck him. It wasn't just fear. It was strength. A silent defiance that matched the wild land itself. He pulled a flask from his saddlebag, kneeling as he set it down within her reach. She eyed it suspiciously, then snatched it, drinking greedily. Water ran down her chin, glinting in the sunlight. Jonah watched her, his chest tight with something he couldn't name. Pity, admiration, maybe something deeper, something more dangerous. "You got folks looking for you?" he asked gently. She hesitated. "No, my people. They're gone, soldiers took them." Her voice cracked, but her gaze never wavered. Jonah swallowed hard. He knew those stories, raids, massacres, children torn from families. He'd told himself to stay out of it, that the frontier was merciless to everyone. But standing here, looking at her, that old lie felt heavier than the Texas heat. From the ridge above came a faint shout. Jonah stiffened, scanning the horizon. A patrol of cavalrymen was cutting across the plain, their blue uniforms catching the sun. Ahyoka froze, her eyes wide. Jonah turned back to her. "If they find you here." His jaw clenched. He didn't finish the thought. Instead, he reached for her hand. She pulled back at first, but then, after a heartbeat, let him. Her skin was warm, trembling. "We gotta move," Jonah said, urgency sharpening his voice. "Now." He pulled her up onto his horse, swinging into the saddle behind her. The mare snorted, sensing the danger, and then they were riding hard, dust kicking up behind them as the sound of hooves and gunmetal grew nearer. The chase had begun, one that would test not only their courage but their hearts. The mare thundered across the prairie, her hooves striking sparks against the stone. Jonah's heart pounded in rhythm with each stride. Behind them, the cavalry patrol had caught their trail. Shouts echoed, rifles glinted, and the chase grew deadly. Ahyoka clung to him, her breath hot against his neck. He could feel her fear, though she made no sound. Jonah guided the horse into a canyon, hoping the narrow walls would swallow their dust and buy them time. "Hold on," he muttered, pulling the reins hard. They slipped into shadow, the sound of hooves muffled against stone. For a moment, it seemed they had lost them. But the girl knew better. They will not stop. "Soldiers always come." Jonah glanced at her. Her eyes weren't just frightened, they were resigned. She had seen this before, lived it. He cursed under his breath. "Then we'll outrun em, or outfight em." As night fell, they found shelter in a hidden cave. Jonah lit a small fire, careful to shield the smoke. Ahyoka sat across from him, silent, watching the flames. "You saved me," she said finally. Jonah shook his head. "Don't reckon I saved nobody yet. We're still breathin', that's all." A pause stretched between them, then she asked softly, "Why? Why risk your life? Jonah stared into the fire. Memories surfaced: his wife, long dead from fever, and the child they never had. Loneliness carved into his soul like the canyons around them. He met her eyes. "'Cause I seen enough wrong in this world. Can't turn my back on it no more." For the first time, she smiled. Small, hesitant, but real. Outside, coyotes howled, and the wind carried the scent of smoked campfires. The cavalry hadn't quit, they were close. By dawn, Jonah knew they couldn't hide forever. He saddled the horse, helped Ahyoka up, and they set off deeper into Apache territorial land feared by white men whispered about in saloons. The land changed: red cliffs, mesquite thickets, and the ruins of villages long abandoned. Ahyoka spoke quietly, pointing out sacred places, teaching him words of her language. Jonah listened, struck by the beauty hidden in her voice, in her world. But danger stalked them. One afternoon, as they crossed a dry river bed, gunfire cracked. Bullets sparked off stone. Jonah dragged Ahyoka down, returning fire with his rifle. Dust rose, horses screamed, and the air filled with smoke. The skirmish was brutal. Jonah shot to soldiers before they retreated, but not before a bullet grazed his side. Blood seeped into his shirt. Ahyoka tore fabric from her dress, pressing it to his wound. "Don't waste your strength," he groaned. She shook her head fiercely. "You saved me, now I save you." For days she cared for him, fetching water, gathering herbs, whispering prayers in her tongue. Jonah, fevered, watched her through half-closed eyes. She was more than a fugitive, she was fierce, loyal. Alive in ways he hadn't felt in years. By the time he stood again, the bond between them had deepened. Not just gratitude, not just survival, something unspoken, forbidden, and undeniable. Yet the world around them had no mercy. In town, whispers spread of a rancher harboring an Apache girl. Bounty hunters rode out, drawn by promises of gold. The law, the army, and the desert itself all turned against them. Jonah knew they had to make a choice: keep running or stand and fight. The final test came at sunset, in a valley where shadows stretched long and the sky burned crimson. Jonah and Ahyoka stood together, backs to the canyon wall, rifles loaded, as riders closed in from every side. Dust choked the air, hooves thundered, and the shouts of men promised death. Jonah turned to her, his face pale but his voice steady. "You don't have to stay. There's a way out through them rocks. Run, and you might live." But Ahyoka shook her head, fire in her eyes. "I will not run again, not without you." Their hands found each other, rough and trembling, holding on as if the world itself tried to tear them apart. The first shots rang out. Jonah fired back, deadly and precise. Ahyoka, fearless, loosed arrows she had crafted from the desert brush. The battle roared, echoing through the canyon like thunder. Men fell, the horse screamed, and still the tide pressed in. Jonah took a bullet to the shoulder, but he fought on. Ahyoka's voice rose above the chaos, chanting words of her people, defiant and unbroken. At last, silence. The valley floor was littered with bodies. Smoke drifted in the dying light. The cavalry had been driven back, but at a terrible cost. Jonah collapsed, blood staining the earth. Ahyoka dropped beside him, cradling his head in her lap. Tears streaked her face, but her voice was steady. "Stay with me. You are strong. You are mine." Jonah's eyes met hers, full of pain but also peace. "Reckon. If I die here, it don't matter. Found something worth fightin' for. Worth lovin'." The stars broke across the sky. Ahyoka bent low, pressing her forehead to his. Around them, the desert whispered its eternal song of sorrow, of courage, of forbidden love that refused to die. And so their story lived on, carried by the wind, remembered in the land where a rancher and an Apache girl dared to love in a world that would never understand.